The dungeons in this game were pretty creative with its focus on puzzles. The gameplay offered unique ways to solve them, like using the stylus to control the boomerang and bomb shoes. But even though the gameplay was good, they were all pretty short, and they all pretty much lacked atmosphere, especially with the same lame theme every dungeon used, which made this list pretty hard to put together. Still, we gave it a shot. Thanks to ZeldaUniverseTV for letting us use their video footage. We're the owners of Triforce, I'm owner 2, and this is our Phantom Hourglass dungeon ranking. As you can guess with the word wind in the title, the Temple of Wind has a lot of wind puzzles. This is the second dungeon in the game, and it's a pretty standard dungeon. The kind of puzzles we see in this dungeon is about wind, going both horizontally and vertically. These puzzles are pretty easy to figure out, but that's pretty much what you should expect from the second dungeon. Throughout the game, there is very little focus on combat within these areas, and this is no exception, to an extent. In one of the lower floors, there are sandworms in the sand, and they were pretty freaky. Other than that, there's nothing that made this dungeon feel special. The very first dungeon in the game is a Temple of Fire, and it lands on our number 7 spot. It may be shorter and easier than the Temple of Wind, but we liked how this worked as a tutorial for the game. This was where we really got to try out the DS's capabilities with the touchscreen, like controlling the boomerang with the stylus, or blowing out candles with the microphone. It was simple, yet so fun to try out. The Temple of Wind had puzzles where you mostly pushed blocks and other objects to use the wind in your advantage, which is something we've seen a lot before. Therefore, we thought it was cooler to actually see the game work along with the DS. Plus, the atmosphere was better here. It really was a Temple of Fire, seeing as there were lava all around, and the lava gave off a red glow, which did help with the atmosphere. While the two previous dungeons, both on this list and in the game, have been pretty simple and not so dangerous, the Temple of Courage kicks it up a notch. It has more difficult puzzles, like invisible paths that you have to draw on your map to remember the correct way, these arrow thingies that you have to turn the correct way, and this gem that you have to place on a pedestal. This is more like it. This place also has more dangerous enemies, with Moldorms, Winders, Beamos, Blade Traps, and more danger in general. It's only fitting that the dungeons get harder, and this one was definitely more challenging than the two others. Still, it wasn't that hard. On 5th is probably one of the most disliked dungeons in the series, the Temple of the Ocean King. Many criticize this place because you have to visit it several times, and that you have to go through the same floors every time. That's pretty much correct, but it allows you to use shortcuts after acquiring new items. This made it a bit easier, but you still had to go through every floor until you reached the only checkpoint. What made things worse were the patrolling phantoms, because you're unable to get rid of them without the phantom blade, which you get at the end of the game. Until then, you could only rely on the few occasions where you could drop them down a hole. Anyway, the Temple of the Ocean King acted as the hub dungeon in this game, since you had to visit it after completing each dungeon elsewhere. It was annoying to go in here every time, even though you do get a checkpoint, and it gets easier after acquiring new items. That's why we put this in the middle. It was a good and fresh idea, but could it have been done better? Maybe. Next up is the Temple of Ice. With a theme like this, it did create a certain atmosphere, which is good. And about the icy floors, I'm surprised it wasn't that annoying. Usually, I hate icy and slippery floors, but I think they did a great job here. Plus, it all looked pretty good. The colors are pretty and nice to look at. We also think that the grappling hook was made to good use here, and used in ways it hasn't been used before. You could pull stuff, you could use it at these poles to get across gaps, but the coolest thing was to use it to make a little line between two poles that allowed you to walk across. And of course, use as a spring. All in all, this was a pretty fun dungeon. It had good puzzles, creative uses with the item, and, may I say, it has a cool atmosphere. We like puns. The dungeon we feel had the absolute strongest atmosphere was definitely the ghost ship. It's dark, there's fog all around, there are bottomless pits, there are skulltulas dropping down from the ceiling, there's blue colored fire, there are reaplinks. Needless to say, it has a creepy and scary atmosphere. Then, of course, there are the diabolical Cuba sisters. You meet one of them, who asks you to find the 3 other sisters and bring her back. It's easy to feel suspicious about this, with her creepy face staring at you. So you do as she asks and escorts the 3 of them back. While escorting them, they show a fear of spiders, with this horrifying scream. Really sets a creepy mood, huh? Your suspicions should grow bigger when they tell you to open the left chest, or don't shoot a reapling in the back with an arrow. They say stuff that won't help you, so it's wise for you to do the opposite. Pick the right chest and shoot an arrow in the back of a reapling, because that will stun them. In the end, it turns out that these 4 sisters are the dungeon's boss. This wasn't the hardest dungeon in the game, but we definitely think it has the strongest atmosphere, and is therefore our number 3 dungeon. The first thing we see and that we liked about Mutoh's temple was the fact that we were inside a pyramid. And that shows on the upper floor, with the whole thing being shaped like that. This pyramid didn't feel anything like other desert temples, like the Spirit Temple from Ocarina of Time or Arbiter's Grounds from Twilight Princess. But what we liked about this place was that it was pretty huge. It had different layers where you had to raise and lower a water level. That should suck, but it did work well here. When there was no water, it was fun to use the hammer to spring yourself up these different layers. It felt complex, it didn't feel like there was a linear path to go. You had to think a little more yourself. Plus, the hammer certainly was a unique and fun item to use. For the first time, thanks to the stylus and touchscreen, you could actually use the hammer outside of your arm's reach. In fact, Celia seems to be the one using it. It's kind of weird, but it makes us feel free. We don't have to move Link around during these fun puzzles, and can do it quicker by pressing the stylus somewhere else around Link. This dungeon was big, it had good puzzles, and we have to mention that it contains Stalfos. And yeah, you already know. At first place, we picked Goron Temple. This dungeon was cool. It didn't really have a certain atmosphere that we could grasp, but it had a few different elements. It had sand, wind, and... wait. I can't remember any fire here. A Goron dungeon without fire? Oh, well. This place also had big, strong enemies, creative puzzles, but the thing we liked the most was being able to control Gongoron, who had also found his way into this dungeon. Gongoron plays differently. He can roll and crush rocks, roll to jump across gaps, and well, mostly he rolls. Still, it was used in fun ways. Link had to press switches to open pathways for Gongoron to have Gongoron open pathways for Link. But in addition to switching between these two, Link also finds the bomb shoes here, which allows for even more fun puzzles with the stylus. All in all, Goron Temple seemed to amuse us the most, and that's why we picked it as our number 1 dungeon in Phantom Hourglass. We hope you liked our Phantom Hourglass countdowns, and haven't forgotten to comment what you think about our videos, or just to let us know how you would rank these dungeons, bosses, characters or whatever. We do hope you subscribe, because then you'll know when our upcoming videos from Spirit Tracks will be out. Thanks for watching, and see you then.